A figure walked out of a cave residence within the sword abyss of Futian mountain. Sword were wrapped around him, and his eyes were full of sword light. A figure walked out of a cave residence within the sword abyss of Futian mountain. Sword were wrapped around him, and his eyes were full of sword light. Brother One has come out of his seclusion. Someone called as everyone looked towards the man who had emerged. Wuxia smiled slightly and nodded to them. His aura has changed, someone in the distance said. A few of them walked towards him calling out, "Brother!" Wuxia had shut himself away in cultivation once he had returned. This had lasted for more than 2 years. Now that he was emerging, he must have advanced a lot. "Why are you all looking at me?" he said with a smile as he saw the group of people coming towards him. There was a note of happiness in his tone. He was obviously in a good mood. "How was your cultivation, brother?" someone asked. Wuxia gave a smile that was full of meaning. The disciples of Sword Abyss reacted to this in many different ways. They looked at him and asked, "Brother, please tell us in detail." "I have almost touched upon the Runhuang path." He looked up into the air, full of emotion. Many people had successfully completed the journey to the Divine Palace, the Sea of the Path, and the Land of Proving the Way, and he had experienced a lot on this trip. He had felt the will of the Sea of the Path, as well as its incomparable vastness. This gave birth to lofty feelings within him. But everything that had happened afterward showed him that although he had great ambitions, he was not strong enough to realize them. But Futian had helped him with his song, adding strength to his sword, and increasing his perception greatly. This had greatly moved him, and thus once he had returned, he had locked himself away in cultivation. It was not until now that he emerged from his seclusion. Moreover, he had truly touched the Runhuang plain. It was not empty boasting. He could already feel that the Runhuang plain was not far away. Everyone was stunned. Wuxia had always been at a higher level than them, and he was the senior brother in Sword Abyss. He was an outstanding swordsman, but he was still far away from the Runhuang plain. They all knew that he must have advanced a lot while shut away in cultivation this time, but they would never have thought that he would touch the Runhuang plain. They were familiar with Wuxia's moral character. He would not lie about something like this. "Congratulations, brother," someone said with a bow. "You are the first person in Sword Abyss to prove yourself worthy," someone said with a sigh of emotion. "Not just Futian Mountain. With the level that you have now reached, no one on Futian Mountain can compare with you," someone else said. When he heard this, Wuxia waved his hand and said, "Stop praising me to death, brothers. All the success that I have achieved today is due to what he gave me. When he is here, he is the foremost disciple of Futian Mountain. Everyone else can only hope to be number 2. A figure flashed in everyone's mind as he said this. It was the white-haired young man who had come back with Wuxia. Everyone was familiar with his deeds, but they were not too sure about the concrete details of what had happened. But Wuxia had said that all his success today was thanks to him. "Brother Wan is Shenjing. No. Is Futian really that strong?" someone asked. Before, Futian had often come to Sword Abyss to cultivate, and many of the disciples there knew him. Thus, they still called him Shenjing. He is not just strong. Wuxia thought back to the trip to the Land of Proving the Way. The song that he gave me back then had as much impact on me as if it was at the Nirvana level. That was why my understanding of swordsmanship increased by leaps and bounds then. Afterward, he gave me a piece of fruit of the way and captured the divine tree of comprehension for us to cultivate at. That was why I was able to comprehend so much. Afterward, I came back and shut myself away in cultivation. Futian's help allowed me to skip over at least several dozen years of hard cultivation. Even though he was already at the peak of the Nirvana level, the time it would take him to reach the Runhuang plain should still be measured in at least decades. But Futian's assistance in the Land of Proving the Way had made it so that he was already close to achieving his goal. His heart was full of wonder and excitement. Forget Futian Mountain. In all of the higher heavens realm, there is probably no one who can compare with him, save for Huangzhong of the Divine Palace, whispered Wuxia. Futian had defeated many cultivators, including heroic figures like Li Daozi and Gai Shishir. This kind of combat talent was incredibly rare. Everyone was silent when they heard what Wuxia said. Although they had heard of the things that Yi Futian had done, hearing someone who had personally touched the Runhuang Plain praise him so highly was still a little shocking. It was a pity that they had not gone to the divine palace and witnessed everything that he had done themselves. Has he come out of his seclusion? Wan Shui asked suddenly. He is probably still cultivating at String Pavilion. Just like you, he is rushing towards the Runhuang Plain, someone said. In that case, he must not be far from achieving his goal, someone else asked. Not necessarily. My level was higher than his in the beginning, and it was not long ago that he broke through to the Nirvana level. In fact, it happened on the trip to the land of proving the way. In such a short time, he wouldn't necessarily be able to cultivate faster than me, even with the fruit of the way, said Wan Shui. After all, I also have had good luck. But no matter if he reaches the Runhuang Plain quickly or slowly, it is just a matter of time. After Li Daozi was defeated by him, he ascended to the Runhuang Plain, then thanked Yi Futian for defeating him. Could he say that he was stronger than him? For someone as talented as Yi Futian, how long it takes him to reach the Runhuang Plain does not mean anything. Upon saying this, he walked away, everyone following him on either side. Wan Shuyi's words made their way around Taishan Mountain very quickly. He went to String Pavilion and learned that Yi Futian was still shut away in cultivation, so he had to go back. On the way, he ran into Junmu and Luoyue. Junmu glanced at him over his shoulder and said, I heard that you touched the Runhuang Plain? Is that due to the help he gave you? Wan Shui looked back at him. Some unpleasant things had happened between Junmu and Yi Futian at the land of proving the way. He had stood by Yi Futian's side through it all, so there was some friction between him and Junmu. Let us leave past problems in the past. I believe he does not care about what happened, said Wan Shui. They were all cultivators of Taishan Mountain. Junmu was the personal disciple of the Taishan Hierophant, and the conflict between them should not be any cause for enmity. They could let it go. After all, it had all been for the sake of getting fruit of the way, so Yi Futian would probably not pursue the matter. I am speaking of something else. Junmu turned to face Wan Shui. I have been fortunate enough to see some success in my cultivation over these last 2 years. I would like to see how much you have advanced. Brother. Beside him, Luoyue frowned, seeming unhappy. Junmu had been in the wrong in the past, and now he was making trouble once again. Everyone around them looked at them. It seemed there would be a conflict between the two of them. Wan Shui and Luoyue had not purposely spread the news about what had happened, and thus the people of Taishan Mountain were not very clear about the details. Only those who were there knew. People like Li Jin of Guqin Valley and Chindeng. These two strode over to them now. After the incident, Yi Futian had invited them to cultivate with him at the Divine Tree of Comprehension. Afterward, they admired Yi Futian greatly. Junmu stood alone. This has nothing to do with you, said Junmu to Luoyue. She was second uncle's daughter, and so she had no right to get involved. If you persist in this, it will affect your cultivation, said Wan Shui. Junmu frowned when he heard this, and an unhappy look crossed his face. Are you trying to teach me? On saying this, he strode forward, and his aura bloomed. Wan Shui felt a burst of pressure. Powerful sword will suddenly burst forth from him. In a flash, endless swords filled the sky, covering the entire area. Everyone's eyes fell upon him. They all felt shaken. His sword will was so strong. Join the swords. As he said this, Wan Shui transformed into a sword and shot forward like a beam of light that dazzled everyone. The great path roared within Junmu, and a burst of incredibly powerful qi exploded out of him. He could feel an astonishing amount of pressure. Each step forward caused him great pain. He raised his fist and slammed out with his fist will. However, the great path flowed in reverse, and his fist will was blocked. Wan Shui descended upon him. He struck out with a single finger, and all the swords returned together. Whoosh! The tip of the sword hit the fists, and divine light pierced through Junmu's body. At that moment, the area where Junmu was standing lit up with dazzling sword light that then disappeared in a flash. Wan Shui returned to his original position, as if he had never moved at all. But blood was flowing from the center of Junmu's fist. He groaned, and more blood poured from his mouth. His face was pale, and his aura was very weak. A single stroke, Everyone felt their hearts tremble fiercely. Wan Shui had defeated Jun Mu with a single sword stroke. Jun Mu had been the leader back during the journey to the land of proving the way. And after 2 years, he had been surpassed. He looked like he was in a daze. He did not understand. How could this be? He has come out from his seclusion. At that moment, someone walked towards them. The voice was somewhat unexpected, and it seemed that his words did not fit the situation. However, this sentence still affected everyone greatly. He had come out of his seclusion. In a flash, everyone forgot about the fight. "He's coming," someone else said. In the distance, a figure was coming towards them. He had white hair and white clothes. He had a powerful aura and a heroic air about him. His aura has changed. Everyone seemed to forget about Jun Mu, and they all looked at Yi Futian. His aura was now even more outstanding. Yi Futian walked over to them. He naturally saw Wan Shui and Jun Mu. Wan Shui turned and walked over to him, saying with a smile, "You've come out." Yi Futian nodded slightly. Yes. All around them, people were drawing nearer. Among them were Luoyue, Li Jiyin, Chen Yu, and more. They were the ones who had gone with him to the land of proving the way. Now they all stood on either side of him. From this, it was obvious how high a place Yi Futian held within their hearts. Yi Futian seemed to sense something, and he looked at Jun Mu. He saw a bit of enmity in his eyes. He did not understand. Why would he bear a grudge against him? That affair back in the land of proving the way probably affected his state of mind, said Wan Shui. There's no need for you to worry about it. He still hoped to avoid friction between Yi Futian and Jun Mu. After all, Jun Mu was a disciple of the Taishan Hierophant. I don't mind, said Yi Futian. He continued forward, passing by Jun Mu. It was not just that he didn't mind. If Jun Mu had not been standing right in front of him, he would have forgotten about him. Wan Shui has touched the Runhuang Plain, have you? Said Jun Mu as he passed by. You've been shut away for more than 2 years. How has your cultivation gone? Not bad, said Yi Futian softly. But I am still not quite a Runhuang. Let me try you, said Jun Mu, and his aura flared to life once again. Countless palm prints of the great path burst forth, shooting straight at Yi Futian. Enough, shouted Wan Shui. But Yi Futian just stood there without moving. The palm prints descended in an instant, slamming into his back. But the light of the great path flashed upon him, and the palm prints were destroyed. He had not moved a muscle. Not even his feet had moved. Are you up for it? Yi Futian said calmly, not even turning his head. Jun Mu's face went white. How could this be? Although his palm prints were not his strongest technique, they were still astonishingly powerful. And yet Yi Futian was still standing there calmly. If there is nothing else, then I will say farewell, continued Yi Futian. He stepped away, leaving Jun Mu staring after him with eyes and mouth wide open. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Yi Futian walked away, leaving the place. Yi Futian walked away, leaving the place. It was as if Jun Mu did not exist to him. There were many people on Taishan Mountain, all of them looking at Jun Mu. This disciple of the Taishan Hierophant was exceedingly talented, and had previously even tried to become Lord Taishuan's personal disciple. He was considered the most powerful young person on the mountain. But now, everyone felt a faint sense of sorrow for him. He had been cultivating for so many years, but now he was ignored. He had thought there would be a fight, but Yi Futian had not even bothered to lift a hand against him. He had never considered him a worthy opponent. Jun Mu had directly launched his attacks against him, but had not even been able to move him. This meant that Yi Futian's body of the Great Path had already been completed. He had truly forged a form from the power of the Great Path. And he was also very strong. Judging by Wan Shui and Li Jiyin's attitude, in terms of popularity, Jun Mu was far inferior to Yi Futian, who had only come to Taishan Mountain recently. What had happened on the trip to the land of proving the way? At that moment, a voice came from the distance. Jun Mu. Stunned, Jun Mu looked up in the direction of the palace where Lord Taishan was. He bowed and said, Master. He could naturally tell that the voice he was hearing was that of his master, the Taishan Hierophant. You must shut yourself away in seclusion to cultivate. Do not come out until you have achieved success, said the Taishan Hierophant. Junmu trembled slightly, and his face turned as white as paper. Was his master punishing him as well? Yes, master. Junmu did not dare protest. He bowed and went to do as he was told. Everyone pitied him as they watched him leave. Many of them sighed to themselves. He was both detestable and pitiable. Wan Shuyi sighed to himself as well when he saw this. Cultivating was not easy. Someone of Junmu's level should not be reduced to this. But this was because everything that had happened on the trip to the land of proving the way had presented a huge obstacle to Junmu. He had persistently stuck to the wrong course, and thus he had come to this point. Today's events would certainly affect his state of mind, and could even affect his future success. Yi Futian continued walking forward until he reached Lord Taishuan's cultivation temple. Several figures appeared on the stairs. In addition to Lord Taishan, the Taishan Hierophant, and the other great disciples were there as well. They had probably come to discuss some matter. Yi Futian bowed in greeting. The people on the stairs looked at him. There was a deep look in Lord Taishuan's eyes as he said, "How was your period of seclusion? I have forged my body of the great path, but I was unable to connect it to the worldly great path. I do not understand it well enough," he said. "Moreover, I felt that it would be useless to continue cultivating. I do not think that I can break through this barrier through cultivation. Thus, I have come to ask you for instruction. The Runhuang Plain is like a barrier. Although many people are blocked by the prospect of forging a body of the great path, this is only a single hurdle that is difficult to cross over. In reality, comprehending a spirit of the way is much harder. One can rely on external power to forge a body, such as the fruit of the way. You have used what you gained on the trip to the land of proving the way to help you forge a body, but it has only been a short time since you reached the nirvana level. And so you are missing some crucial experiences. You need to find opportunities to experience these," said Lord Taishan. "Previously, you were only an unblemished saint. Then you reached the nirvana plane on the trip to the land of proving the way. Then you came back and shut yourself away in cultivation. In such a short time, you have already advanced by leaps and bounds. And yet you are still not satisfied? You still want to advance to the Runhuang level?" asked Empress Yin with a grin. The speed that he was advancing at was putting many people to shame. Of course, this also had to do with his experiences on the trip to the land of proving the way. In reality, this trip and his sojourn at the Divine Palace had been very advantageous to him, and he had learned a lot. That was why he was able to forge a body of the great path. His perception had become very deep, and he cannot have been too far from the Runhuang Plain. But under normal circumstances, it would take many years to reach this level. Uncommon people have uncommon ways of thinking. We can't understand him, said the city lord of Taishan with a smile. When his daughter had returned from the Divine Palace, he had heard Yi Futian mentioned many times, and she had praised him to high heavens. But the man was indeed incredible. Elders like him were really no match. The new generation would soon supersede the old. At that moment, Lord Taishan rose and walked over to the stairs. He looked at Yi Futian and said, "I heard that you are a casual cultivator from the heavenly mandate realm. I know that you cultivated in the celestial gate of vast heaven before. Who was your previous master?" "I have had several masters, but none of them are at your level," said Yi Futian with a bow. "Oh." Lord Taishan was surprised. Then he asked, "Who was it that taught you how to cultivate?" "My recent cultivation methods were taught to me by a master who was not of a high level. Certainly nowhere near your level. You have probably never heard of him," answered Yi Futian. He did not know why Lord Taishan was asking this. He was not at a high level, who only became a Runhuang several years ago, said Yi Futian with a slight nod. Lord Taishan nodded slightly and did not ask any more questions. He said, "You are now at a bottleneck in your cultivation, one that would indeed be difficult to break through simply by shutting yourself away and cultivating. You lack the opportunities to break through to the next level. If you wish, I will send you somewhere to cultivate. A good friend of mine is there. This will be a good experience for you. Perhaps you will find an opportunity to break through to the next level." Yi Futian was silent for a time. Lord Taishian was at such a high level. Even before he had reached his current level, he was one of the most powerful renhuangs. His good friend must be someone at the same level as him, and must be an excellent cultivator. Moreover, Lord Taishian must be sending him for a good reason. I do wish to go, said Yi Futian. It is not in the higher heavens realm, said Lord Taishian. No matter. One can cultivate anywhere, answered Yi Futian. Lord Taishian smiled and nodded. Go and rest now. You have a long time in cultivation, so you should relax. I will let you know when it is time to leave. Thank you, master, said Yi Futian with a bow. He was very excited. He had only met Lord Taishian face to face a few times, and was not his personal disciple like many people thought. But Lord Taishian was still willing to help him. He truly was generous. He was very lucky to have met an elder like him. Master, many people are watching him now. Where are you sending him? Asked Empress Yen. She was a little curious, and she did not know what her master was thinking. I am sending him to an old friend, answered Lord Taishian. Yi Futian might have some sort of deep connection with him. What deep connection? Asked Empress Yen. I am not entirely sure. We will know once he goes there. This young man is incredibly talented, and thus is well suited to go there to cultivate. Perhaps he will have a chance to break through to the next level there. Once he is a renhuang, he will be able to protect himself much better, said Lord Taishian. He naturally knew that many people in the outside world were watching Yi Futian now. It was not just the people from the Golden Divine Nation. The people who had come from the Heavenly Mandate realm had probably come because of what had happened there. Yi Futian returned to String Pavilion. Yaya was there cultivating. She opened her eyes when she heard him coming and asked, What's wrong? Nothing, I'm just watching you, he answered with a smile. Nowadays, Yaya was even more powerful than she had been. She had gained a lot from the trip to the Divine Palace as well. Yaya rolled her eyes at him, then ignored him. She shut her eyes and continued cultivating. Yi Futian's face darkened, but this was just how Yaya was. He smiled then. Yaya was the only one of his friends here in the higher heavens realm. He did not know how the others were faring. How was Yu Sheng doing cultivating with the divine dragons? Where had elder brother, third brother, Wuxian, and that cold and arrogant princess gone? Where were his master and the others? 3 years had passed in the blink of an eye. As his level increased, time seemed to move faster. It passed without him realizing it. Now he stopped and thought of the time when they were all together. He also thought of Brahma's pure sky. He would have to return there. But everything rode on him being able to become a renhuang. Brother Yi, came a voice from outside. Yi Futian's will moved towards the voice, and he said, Come in. Soon, a figure walked over towards the mountain they were on. He realized it was Li Jiyin of Guqin Valley. Yi Futian naturally remembered her. The first time she had come to Guqin Valley, she had been very proud, and had a chip on her shoulder. Now she was calm and had a clear look in her eyes. She bowed to him and said, I saw that you emerged from your seclusion, so I came here to bother you. Yi Futian smiled slightly and said, What can I do for you? I have a question about music that I hope you can help me solve, she said. Not far away, Yaya opened her eyes and looked at her. Did Guqin Valley not have their own elders? Why come running here to ask Yi Futian? But she did not really care about that. She was just upset that her cultivation had been disturbed. Of course, Yi Futian nodded. Then, I will play a piece for you, said Li Jiyin. She played a song on her guqin. It was melodious and well written. Do you think it's missing something? Asked Li Jiyin. The composition is full of depth, and it is technically beautiful, said Yi Futian with a slight smile. But it needs more of an artistic conception. When I listened to it, I did not let go of myself and become immersed in the world of music. Yi Futian felt like he wasn't able to help her too much. These problems were not hard to see, but would be incredibly difficult to fix. However, Li Jiyin had definitely already known this, so there was no need for her to ask him for help. But she had come to him for help, so he could not refuse her. They chatted for a while, and then Li Jiyin said farewell. Afterward, Luoyue came as well. She also had a question about cultivation. She wanted his help with swordsmanship. But Luoyue was different than Li Jiyin. She was honestly looking for help, and did not have ulterior motives. Futian did not make too many suggestions. He just showed her a sword stroke and played some music to help her. Luoyue learned the sword stroke on the spot and dedicated herself to practicing it. She left with a smile. Later, a legend about Futian spread throughout Taishan Mountain. Whenever disciple came to String Pavilion asking for help, he would not refuse them, but would instead discuss cultivation in depth with them. This was a form of mutual learning, as it let him see if he was able to help others with the cultivation that he himself had attained. He had been in seclusion for so long that he naturally would not want to cultivate alone anymore. Lord Taishan had asked him to wait, and so he would wait calmly. Half a month passed in the blink of an eye. Finally, Lord Taishan summoned Futian. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. On the Taishan Mountain, Futian came here to see Lord Taishan. There was no one else, not even Yaya. He didn't know where she was, and he planned to let Yaya stay on Taishan Mountain to cultivate. Futian didn't have too high expectations for Yaya, and for him, it would be enough as long as she could break the shackles and enter the Runhuang Plain and be safe. On the Taishan Mountain, Futian came here to see Lord Taishan. There was no one else, not even Yaya. He didn't know where she was, and he planned to let Yaya stay on Taishan Mountain to cultivate. Futian didn't have too high expectations for Yaya, and for him, it would be enough as long as she could break the shackles and enter the Runhuang Plain and be safe. In the future, Yaya could travel around the 3,000 realms of the Great Path and settle down in a realm and become an empress. Of course, this was his idea. If Yaya knew, who knew what she would think? Do you want to depart? Lord Taishan asked Futian directly when he came. Lord, would you go in person? Futian said. Beside Futian, the Lord was here alone, so obviously, he was not going to bring other people with him. I have not seen my old friend for a long time. This time, I want to go to visit him, not just because of you, Lord Taishan said with a smile. Okay, Futian nodded and said, then let's go. Lord Taishan raised his hand, and suddenly, a bright beam of sword light shone. A giant sword appeared in front of the two. Lord Taishan walked directly up there, looked back at Futian, and said, come with me. Futian stepped up to the giant sword. The next moment, the giant sword flew through the air. It disappeared in an instant and traversed an infinite distance. The giant sword was wrapped in a sword curtain, blocking the outside wind. Futian couldn't feel a trace of external force in it, but he could perceive that the changing of seasons was rapidly going on. In just a moment, Futian found that he was no longer on the ground, and he could not even see the buildings. There was only deep and endless emptiness in front of his eyes. Are we out of the higher heavens realm? Futian asked, looking at Lord Taishan beside him. Yes, Lord Taishan nodded and said, look down. Futian took a look below, and could vaguely see a boundless huge tectonic plate, which was releasing light. It laid between the sky and earth. It was the upper heavens realm. In fact, they were already in an extremely distant place, but because the upper heavens realm was too large, it could still be seen. Futian was a little surprised, but he was not shocked because he knew Lord Taishuan's strength. Lord Taishuan's ability exceeded that of a Runhuang figure, so how fast could he go? It was impossible to estimate. The boundless upper heavens realm was extremely vast in the eyes of Saint Plain cultivators, but no realm among the 3,000 realms of the Great Path was large enough for Lord Taishan. The more powerful a person was, the less he or she would be affected by the barrier of distance, or the influence could be none. Is this the world of starry sky? Why can't I see the endless stars? Futian whispered. In the past, the cross-border travels he had were all aided by spatial matrices. This was the first time he directly crossed the realm with human power. Everything he saw was so clear. The boundless world gave him a very strange feeling. This was not like the description of the universe, nor like the imaginary gorgeous starry sky, but was lonely and deadly silent. There were turbulent torrents drifting around, and sometimes they even encountered storms of the Great Path. In this boundless space, Yi Futian had an illusion that his speed seemed to slow down, and that he could see everything more clearly. Lord, what kind of world is this world? Yi Futian asked. He had some doubts. Last time, in the ancestral shrine, the mysterious man said that the world was unreal. What did it mean? The world where sky and earth collapse, Lord Taishian whispered. As for the truth of the world, you need to explore it yourself. Yi Futian's talent for cultivation was outstanding, and his potential was limitless. Now he was at the height of his youth. Lord Taishian didn't want him to know the cruel truth of the world too early. Perhaps this would be a blow to his state of mind. The path of the world collapses. Yi Futian had heard of these words several times. Was this deadly silent world a result of the collapse of the path of the world? Then how prosperous the world was before the collapse of the sky and earth. Where are we going on this trip? Yi Futian asked again. Tianhe realm, Lord Taishian replied. Yi Futian showed doubt. Tianhe realm did not belong to the 9 supreme realms. He had never heard of this realm. However, Yi Futian didn't continue asking. Since Lord Taishian took him, he naturally had his reasons. Lord Taishuan's old friend must also be a great character. The two walked through the lonely, deep and endless space. After a while, Lord Taishian said to Yi Futian, "We will arrive soon." On his way, Yi Futian had been observing, looking at this endless space. He heard Lord Taishuan's words and looked down. Then the sword penetrated directly into another space, where Yi Futian saw the land and mountains, rivers and seas. The azure sky was clean as if it had been washed. They flew under the clouds, and their speed dropped. Because it was Lord Taishian who steered the sword, after they slowed down, their speed was still very fast. Yi Futian noticed that there were very few human traces along the way and felt somewhat curious. Even in the wilderness of mountains, there should have been a lot of people cultivating. Tianhe realm experienced a catastrophic war many years ago, and its vitality was severely damaged. Many cultivators died, and later a lot of cultivators migrated and left. After many years, Tianhe realm has recovered, but it is no longer as prosperous as before, Lord Taishian said. His voice was calm, but what behind his words was an epic war that destroyed a realm. Yi Futian couldn't imagine how cruel it was. Who caused such a terrifying war? What was it for? My friend is revered by people of the Tianhe realm as the Sky River Great Elder. When he preached in the Tianhe realm, he was the most famous and prestigious person here. He had 3,000 disciples who scattered all over the world, Lord Taishian continued. Yi Futian was a little surprised when he heard this title. This was the Tianhe realm, and for someone named Tianhe Great Elder, one could imagine how honorable the title was. However, after that war, he sent away all his disciples. I don't know how he is now, whether or not he is still preaching and cultivating. Lord Taishian murmured as if talking to himself. They keep moving forward, and Yi Futian kept all the Lord's words in mind. After a while they saw human traces and city buildings. They passed through the crowds and came to a land of fairy-like, misty mountains. It seemed that even mines were isolated from these mountains, and the atmosphere was very mysterious. I haven't seen anyone for many years. At this time, a voice said from the mist. The person seemed to be aware of their arrival, and immediately told them they were unwelcome. Even me, another voice said. In the next moment Lord Taishian directly showed up on a Fei peak. Sitting on Xianren Peak, there was an old man with white hair. His hair was scattered on his shoulders, and he looked quite scruffy. Yi Futian could hardly imagine that such a big person of the realm would be so careless about his own image. The old man with white hair looked at Lord Taishian, then smiled and said, "How come you are here to see me? I haven't been here for many years," Lord Taishian said with a smile. "By the way, today, I bring a young man to visit you." Sky River Great Elder took a look at Yi Futian, and saw that his hair was also white. He could not help but smile as he said, "A young boy with white hair. He must also have a sad story." "Yi Futian is here to see Great Elder," Yi Futian said and bowed to him in respect. Sky River Great Elder nodded slightly. He asked Lord Taishian, "Your disciple?" "No." Lord Taishian shook his head and said, "I haven't seen you in years. Do you want to play Go with me?" "Sure." Sky River Great Elder nodded and said. He waved his hand, and all of a sudden, a go board appeared in front of him. He pointed at Lord Taishian and said, "You sit on whichever side you want and get your own go pieces." Lord Taishian nodded and sat directly in front of the go board. And these two old men really started to play go. Yi Futian stood aside to watch quietly. He was also proficient in go, but when he saw two seniors playing it, he only felt that there was a great horror. The computing power of people of their realm was too great for him to understand, and it was completely beyond the level of go. So many years have gone. Are you still thinking about things from that year? Lord Taishian dropped a piece and asked. I have forgotten. The old man shook his head and said, You have forgotten? Is there anyone other than you here? Lord Taishian asked. How grand the scene was. You used to have 3,000 disciples, and your disciples were all over the world. Where are they now? There is a limitation to a person's ability. The old man shook his head and said with a smile. No. Lord Taishian shook his head and dropped another piece, saying, You are just blaming yourself and think it is all your fault. Did you come from afar just to tell me these things? The old man said and also dropped a go piece. But he did it slowly and casually. Some time ago, Yi Futian proved his path in the Shangxiao Divine Palace and entered the ancestral shrine, Lord Taishian said. The old man looked up at Yi Futian again, smiling. From first glance, I could tell you have a good fortune. Although the road of cultivation can be tough, a prosperous future is waiting for you. You are bound to stir up a storm in the future. You see it? Lord Taishian asked. I haven't seen anyone's fortune for a long time. The old man shook his head and said, You came here because of this young man. What is the matter? Just say it. Lord Taishian did not respond but dropped a go piece, and then turned to look at Yi Futian next to him, and said, Show your cultivation method to show this senior. My cultivation method? Yi Futian asked, puzzled. Yes. Lord Taishian nodded and said, The cultivation method that used your body as the melting furnace of the great path. Yi Futian didn't know when Lord Taishian had seen it. He remembered the Lord also asked about it before departure. Despite some doubts, he still did as he was told, and released the deed of thorough comprehension. Suddenly, the light of the great path shone brightly, and he turned into the furnace of the great path. Seeing this scene, the old man put down the go piece in his hand and straightened up. He gazed at Yi Futian and asked, Who taught this skill to you? My teacher, Yi Futian said. Could it be that the deed of thorough comprehension was related to this elder? Did Lord Taishian bring him here because of this? Who is your teacher? The old man stared at Yi Futian and asked. Yi Futian also looked at him. Lord Taishian said, You can tell him. Yi Futian nodded. He trusted that Lord Taishian would not harm him, and there was no need to worry. Qi Xinggang, Yi Futian said. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Qi Xinggang. Qi Xinggang. When Sky River Great Elder heard the name, his arms trembled slightly. He stared at Yi Futian and was silent for a moment. Yi Futian narrowed his eyes slightly. From Sky River Great Elder's look, he could tell that Sky River Great Elder knew his teacher. There must be a reason for Lord Taishian to bring him here. Moreover, Lord Taishian brought him here because of his cultivation method. So did it mean that this cultivation method was related to Sky River Great Elder? Could it be? He thought of a possibility. How is he doing now? Is he okay? After a moment of silence, Sky River Great Elder pulled back from thoughts and asked Yi Futian. I had some troubles in the heavenly mandate realm before, and my teacher and I were separated. Now I don't know where he is, but I think he should be fine, Yi Futian said. After all, teacher was in Renhuang Plain. What is his cultivation level? Sky River Great Elder asked. He entered the Renhuang Plain a few years ago, Yi Futian replied. His progress is too slow. How could he enter Renhuang Plain just a few years ago? Sky River Great Elder shook his head and said, At that time, his cultivation was slow, but I didn't expect it would get even slower. Sir, you are my teachers? Yi Futian asked, even though he had his own speculations. Hearing Sky River Great Elder's words, he had his answer. The deed of thorough comprehension is my cultivation method. Sky River Great Elder said to Yi Futian. It's just as I thought, Yi Futian thought, his heart shivering. He gazed at the old man, and then bowed down to the Sky River Great Elder again. This time he saluted carefully and said, Yi Futian is here to salute you, my grandmaster. Your teacher is my son-in-law, Sky River Great Elder said again. Yi Futian was stunned and felt pain in his heart. What happened to teacher's wife? Yi Futian murmured. He could slightly tell something bad had happened to her, but he still wanted to be hopeful. Teacher raised Feishua alone, so it was very possible. It has been many years since she passed away. The old man sighed and looked up at the sky. There was still sorrow in his eyes. It's been so many years. Time to let it go. Lord Taixian sighed. Sky River Great Elder didn't reply, and looked at Yi Futian. Somehow nervous, he asked, Does your teacher have a daughter? Yes, Yi Futian said and nodded. How is she? Sky River Great Elder asked, staring at him with anxious eyes. Yi Futian speculated that he very likely knew about Feishua, which was why he was worried, and even doubted whether or not Feishua was still alive. She's fine, but there is some problem with her eyes, Yi Futian said. Sky River Great Elder sighed with relief and nodded, saying, Good. However, now that he is determined to leave, why do you show up here? Sky River Great Elders whispered. He did not understand. The Heavenly Mandate Realm was one of the 9 supreme realms. He had ambition there, so why should he return? Was it because of the white-haired young man? Lord Taixian said that he broke into the ancestral land of the Divine Palace, and he brought Yi Futian here personally. He also noticed that this young man was indeed a person with good fortune. Perhaps Qi Xiangang was willing to venture out because of the young man. From now on, tell the outside world that you are my disciple, and that I taught you the deed of thorough comprehension. Sky River Great Elder looked at Yi Futian and said, Do you understand? Yi Futian shook his head. He was confused and said, Does my teacher have foes? Yes, Sky River Great Elder nodded and said. Very powerful? Yi Futian asked. I can't fight them at all. Even Taixian now has no way to do it, Sky River Great Elder said. Although he obviously knew that Lord Taixian had entered a higher plane, he still said that even Lord Taixian had no way to fight them. One could imagine how powerful the foes were. Yi Futian's face turned pale. How could teacher offend such a powerful enemy? Was it because of the thing in Feishua's body? That thing had attracted the life-spirit world tree once when Yi Futian's plane was low. Now it seemed that this thing was likely to be a divine treasure of the Great Path, which naturally contained path. Because of that thing's existence, Feishua had been under threat of death and needed deep sleep. After he controlled the thing with his life spirit, Feishua's progress in cultivation was incredibly fast. That treasure could perfectly fit Feishua's body. However, with teacher's saint cultivation plane at that time, it was nearly impossible for him to obtain such a treasure, unless it was the Sky River Great Elder who got it. So teacher was his son-in-law. Although I am not clear on what happened back then, I know a little bit. It is said that it triggered the battle that destroyed the realm. Your grandmaster used to preach around the world, and the Tianhe realm was extremely prosperous. His students scattered all over the Tianhe realm, but numerous of them died in that battle. So did your teacher's wife, Lord Taixian said. Were my teacher and Feishua the only ones alive? Yi Futian murmured. He couldn't imagine the battle that destroyed the realm, but he suddenly understood many things that happened previously, and could better understand his teacher as a person. Did some of his ideas also come from the Sky River Great Elder? He remembered that when he said the path was boundless, teacher was quite touched. Although he did not have many disciples, his philosophy should also inherit from the Sky River Great Elder. However, unlike the Sky River Great Elder, he could only create the Great Li Academy in the Great Li dynasty. When I escorted your teacher away, he was also severely wounded and in a dangerous situation. I don't know anything about him later, the Sky River Great Elder said. Emperor Li is gracious to teacher. Yi Futian thought of this and suddenly he understood something. No wonder teacher asked for death, and only asked for Feishua to leave at that time. He had no regrets. Perhaps in teacher's eyes, nothing was important anymore as long as Feishua lived. Who offended teacher? What is the thing in Feishua's body? And why did teachers' foes want to destroy the realm? Futian asked, anxious. There were many doubts in his heart that he wanted to solve. You know about the thing in Feishua's body? Sky River Great Elder asked, looking at Futian, a little surprised. It seemed that Futian knew a lot of things. How could Qi Xiangang value him so much? Yes, Futian nodded. He would not say that he had helped Feishua control that thing. Sky River Great Elder gave Futian a serious look. It is a long story, Sky River Great Elder said with a sigh. In fact, it has nothing to do with your teacher. He is also a victim. If I had not married Nong Yue to him, he should have had a prosperous future. May I know more? Futian bowed and said. He wanted to know what happened at that time. Sit down and listen to me, the old man said with a sigh. He sat down in front of Lord Taixian. Futian nodded and sat down beside the two. He wanted to hear his teacher's story carefully. It was about teacher's past, and he wanted to know more. He was clear how the Dali Imperial advisor treated him. When he was in the Crimson Dragon realm, teacher could have killed him and taken the credit, but he didn't do so. I don't know where to start, Sky River Great Elder said, and seemed to be caught up in memories. Lord Taixian said. In fact, the story is not complicated. It was probably a beautiful mistake for you to be together. Futian froze. Did this matter involve Great Elder's wife? You have been to the Heavenly Mandate Realm, and the Upper Heaven Realm of the 9 Great Supreme Realm. I guess you have not been to other realms yet. In one of the 9 Great Supreme Realms, there is a super force with a long history. Your Grandmaster has a very deep relationship with them, and was even tied in marriage with one talented lady of the clan, who was your Grandmaster's wife. At that time, the couple was the envy of everyone, Lord Taixian said with emotionally. He was very young when he met Sky River Great Elders. At that time, she was still so beautiful, stunning. Sky River Great Elder recalled the beauty of his wife. You were also charismatic and gallant back then, Lord Taixian said, smiling. It was many years ago. Sky River Great Elder shook his head and said. All of this may be due to the character. If you had entered the Force with her then, you would now have a transcendent status in the Supreme Realm. But you chose to preach in the Tianhe Realm, said Lord Taixian. What I pursue is different. Sky River Great Elder shook his head and said. She is also willing to follow me and preach in the Tianhe Realm. The majority of my disciples, good or bad, were excellent. Qi Xiangang was one of my disciples. However, he is not an outstanding one among them. Sky River Great Elders looked at Futian and said. However, although your teacher's talent is not very outstanding, his state of mind is transcendent, somewhat similar to mine. Although his cultivation was not fast, he was definitely the type that could achieve great success. Therefore, I gave special attention to him. So your teacher got familiar with my daughter. It was not supposed to be a problem, but the blood of that clan also flowed in Nongyue's body. They had other thoughts, but even so, she and I still had our right to speak up. But the problem was that thing was involved. The Sky River Great Elder showed pain in his eyes. Your teacher's masteress, my wife, had extremely outstanding talent. During the competition of that thing, it was actually she and I who obtained it. Her clan negotiated with us. And in the end, we decided to place that thing in my daughter's body. That is to say, into the body of your teacher's wife. As she grew up, she was the attention of the whole family, and her status in the family was also important. However, she fell in love with my teacher, Futian whispered. This might be the sin. The Grandmaster also said. Your teacher's state of mind was extraordinary, and he could have been successful later in life. But after all, his talent was not the best at that time. As the successor of the top family who was reared with high expectations, she was not allowed to fall in love with a man like him. Probably, this was the original sin. If I let them break up at that time, maybe it would only be painful for a while. But the two most important women in my life are much more stubborn than me. No wonder they are mother and daughter. Sky River Great Elder sighed. Later, the situation became worse, and countless people in Tianhe Realm stood up for it. In the end, it caused irreparable consequences. The Shun clan was furious and exterminated the whole realm, and the Tianhe Realm was stained with blood. It was my sin. What about her? Futian's heart shivered. Teacher's wife passed away, But what about Sky River Great Elder's wife? She was taken back and imprisoned in the clan. I don't know if she is alive or dead, Sky River Great Elder said, looking up at the sky. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Futian was speechless. Futian was speechless. The Sky River Great Elder and the Lady of the Divine Clan came together, which seemed to be a romantic but poignant story. He was a genius with qualifications, so the Divine Clan had no complaints. The Great Elder's daughter, the teacher's wife, had a similar story in the Tianhe realm. But this time, the couple was opposed by the authoritarian Divine Clan. The teacher's wife was the chosen successor of the Divine Treasure, the hope of the clan. All members of the clan had fixed their eyes on her. How could they allow her to be with a man whose talent was not very outstanding? The successor chosen by the Divine Clan must be a peerless genius, a lady of her time beyond compare, with the blood of the Divine Clan flowing in her body. She was the daughter of the Sky River Great Elder and the daughter of the Divine Clan, but she chose Teacher as her partner. Futian did not know whether he should be happy for Teacher or not. Although Grandmaster said that Teacher's talent was not top-notch, his status of heart was extraordinary. Futian also felt that his teacher, the former greatly imperial advisor, deserved all these things. Humans were fortune's fools. For these two remarkable women of the Divine Clan, Teacher's wife departed this life, and Grandmaster's wife was brought back to the clan. Grandmaster didn't know if she was alive. Moreover, they also experienced the disastrous war, which let rivers of blood flow in the Tianhe realm. All that had happened was too cruel. Lord Taixian said that Grandmaster had students all over the world, and he taught at least 3,000 disciples personally. Many of his disciples must also be on his side, who completely provoked anger in the Divine Clan. The furious Divine Clan came down from the Supreme Realm and annihilated the whole Tianhe realm. How cold-blooded they were. Without these two ladies, no one would have been able to survive, and I might have also died in the war. They were so outstanding. Both Xiangang and I couldn't compare with them. Sky River Great Elder sighed. One fought for death, and the other one sought death. Hearing the old man lament, although Futian didn't experience the events of that time, he seemed to be able to see the peerless elegance of these two women. They sacrificed themselves to save their lovers. No wonder the teacher's hope was just that Feishue could live well. As for anything else, maybe he didn't care at all. He also understood that there was no hope for revenge in this life. Some families were strong enough to make one despair. Living in the shadow of the destruction of a realm, how could he not despair? Since there was a great disparity in strength, why did they choose to go to war? Futian sighed. Why did they go to that point? Shouldn't they give up the idea when being compared with life? Being alive meant hope. You may not know the character of your teacher's wife. Although she was young at that time, her personality was extremely strong. She gave Feishue the treasure without the consent of the family. She wanted her to inherit it, thinking that the family would compromise and accept your teacher, as well as Feishue because of it. However, she still underestimated the persistence of the clan, and how obstinate the clan was. They wanted to take Feishue to the family, and take out her bones to get the thing. Of course, your teacher and his wife couldn't tolerate it. A battle quickly broke out, and then the whole situation went out of control. The Sky River Great Elder sighed. He could still remember all things that happened in the battle. Although he was revered by the people of Tianhe realm, and was titled Sky River Great Elder, he always thought that he was not as prestigious as his wife. She was truly a peerless lady. It is the story. So many years have passed, and I didn't expect I would mention it to a young man like you. But it is not a secret. From now on, you should just keep in mind that your deed of thorough comprehension was taught by me. When you are outside, just say you are my disciple. Don't let people know the existence of your teacher, otherwise, it will be very bad for you, Sky River Great Elder said. After the things of that year, the Divine Clan still did not give up searching for Qi Xiangang and Feishue. The treasure was still in Feishue's body, although they were the ones who actually obtained them. The Divine Clan always regarded it as a treasure belonging to the Divine Clan. They later gave up after they failed to find it. After all, it was impossible to pay attention to countless realms forever, and they didn't have so much manpower to handle the task. However, once there was a clue, people of the clan would definitely investigate it to the end. So if they saw Yi Futian's deed of thorough comprehension, they would definitely recognize it. I see, Yi Futian replied, carefully nodding. During this time, you can stay here to cultivate, the Sky River Great Elder said again. Yi Futian looked at this old man with white hair, the top figure known as the Sky River Great Elder, who wore a lot of wrinkles of time on his face. The things that happened in the past must have hit him very hard. Grandmaster, don't you blame my teacher? Yi Futian asked. Except for teacher. Everyone in the Sky River Great Elder's family stood on the peak of the realm with extraordinary life experience. But because of the teacher and his wife's marriage, all the tragic things happened. Didn't the Sky River Great Elder regret allowing them to be together? If I had blamed him, would he become my son-in-law? The Sky River Great Elder said carelessly. At that time, I had many disciples. Many of them were top-notch people, and countless people had outstanding talents. Even the divine clan sent their cultivators to study under my guidance. As a teacher, I should have favored the most talented disciples. However, your teacher's temperament was closest to mine, and he was most like me. Even though his talent was lacking, I knew he would still become a master one day. Cultivators are never short of time. As long as he could hold on, he would be able to surpass me, and with his status of mind, he would certainly survive the time. Unfortunately, such an opportunity was not given to us. I heard you said that he hadn't entered the Runhuang Plain until a few years ago, and I can understand that his state of mind must have been greatly hit. But since he had become emperor, he must have gradually come out of the shadow of that time. Lord Taishian said, It's been so many years. You should come out as soon as possible. How spirited the Sky River Great Elder was in those days. But now you are just listless. I am afraid that the people of Tianhe Realm will forget you soon. I am afraid the Tianhe Realm will not forget me, the Sky River Great Elder said. He felt he was the sinner of the Tianhe Realm. Come on, Lord Taishian shook his head and said. I will not persuade you anymore. I have known you for so many years. You used to be more outstanding than me, and should have also entered my plane. But you still can't make the breakthrough. It's time to reflect on yourself. I sent you your successor, and now you should have an idea of how to teach him. He has entered the ancestral land of the Divine Palace, a very important disciple to your son-in-law. In the future, he can be a great person, Lord Taishian said. I've finished my task, so I won't bother you anymore. When he talked, Lord Taishian stood up and got ready to leave. Sir, will you go back? Yi Futian asked. Yes. You focus on cultivating. Changing to another environment and seeing different scenery can help you make a breakthrough, Lord Taishian said. Yi Futian nodded and didn't say anything. A person like Lord Taishian could naturally come and go as he pleased. The friendship between noblemen was as pale as water. He had shown his sincerity by coming to see the Sky River Great Elder and send Yi Futian here. I'll take care of that girl for you, don't worry. Now many people in the upper heavens realm are aiming at you. No one will know that you are here, Lord Taishian said, smiling. He then looked at the Sky River Great Elder and said, I should go now. Okay, the Sky River Great Elder said, calmly nodding. Lord Taishian stepped out and disappeared directly. After Lord Taishian left, Sky River Great Elder turned to Yi Futian and said, You only mentioned that your teacher was separated with you in the heavenly mandate realm. Where is Feishue? Isn't she with you? No, Yi Futian said, shaking his head. Where is she? The old man asked. Yi Futian looked at him and wanted to say something, but he was silent again. The old man nodded when he saw his reaction and said, You don't have to tell me anymore. Teacher has several disciples besides me. They are taking care of Feishue, and Feishue's cultivation is progressing very fast now. She is totally safe, Yi Futian said. Good, the old man said and nodded. You are very cautious. Grandmaster, Yi Futian stuttered, looking embarrassed. But you are right. Don't absolutely trust anybody except yourself and your teacher. Sky River Great Elder got up and said. Follow me. He walked forward, and Yi Futian followed him. On the ancient peak, the Sky River Great Elder arranged a lot of barriers. They came to a huge cave for cultivation. The old man walked in first, and Yi Futian followed him through a long corridor in the cave. They entered the inside of the mountain. The sight became bright suddenly. The cave was huge, and the divine light was shining. Inside the cave, ancient characters were suspended in the air, rotating and spinning. Qian Ku and Li Qin. Yi Futian looked at these characters, each of which was corresponding to one ancient character in the deed of thorough comprehension. These characters seemed to take away the power of the world inside the cave, forming a vacuum and converging into a beam. In the middle of the lower space surrounded by ancient characters, a phantom figure condensed and emerged. It was not a real person, but a phantom body formed by the path of sky and earth. Although your teacher has taught you the cultivation method of the deed of thorough comprehension, I guess it is not complete, and the mood is lacking. Here is engraved by me, and contains the true meaning of the deed of thorough comprehension. You can cultivate here for a while to fully comprehend it. Sky River Great Elder told Yi Futian. Thank you, Grandmaster, Yi Futian replied, nodding. The deed of thorough comprehension was not created by me. I also obtained it by coincidence. Its knowledge is extremely mysterious and deep. Even though your talent is outstanding, you should still spend time cultivating it carefully. At least it could assist you in cultivating until you reach my plane, and even higher, Sky River Great Elder said to Yi Futian. Yi Futian nodded. I will get out. You can practice here, said Sky River Great Elder. He turned and left, leaving Yi Futian alone in the cave, and went outside. Sky River Great Elder came to the edge of the cliff, and looked up at the sky. At this moment his slightly cloudy eyes became extremely sharp, as if his fierce stare could pierce through the sky. However, at the next moment, he lowered his head and regained his original appearance. He still wore that dejected look, and walked towards one direction in the mountain. At this time, outside the Tianhe city, a figure was standing in the crowd. He wore a straw hat, and was looking up to the front, a little dazed. After so many years he finally came back. He had thought he would never return, but today, there was nothing to worry about anymore. After separating from his disciple, no one would know the relationship between them. It was good since, in this way, he could cut off his link with the past. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. 1570 For the inheritor of the mantle. 1570 For the inheritor of the mantle Yi Futian had been cultivating in the cave since he came to the Tianhe realm. The scope of knowledge of the deed of thorough comprehension was great. With it, Yi Futian could refine the power of sky and earth for his own use, let his own body serve as the furnace of the great law, and melt all beings of the world, making his own life force extremely powerful. At this time, in the cave house, Yi Futian was sitting on the illusory figure. He and the phantom became one, and he could clearly feel the glory of the ancient characters descend on his body. Yi Futian felt that he was not sitting in a cave house, but wandering in a secret world. Qian Ku and Li Qin. Each of these ancient characters seemed to have some kind of mysterious power. He sat there perceiving the sky and the earth. He could feel the boundless space, and could even see his true self. Time flew fast. Yi Futian sat quietly in the cave house to meditate and cultivate. Sometimes he went out to take a breath, and perceived the spirit of sky and earth. After each cultivation, he would grow a feeling and felt that his perception of sky and earth became clearer. Above the lone mountain, everything seemed exceptionally quiet all the time. One day, Yi Futian walked to the edge of the mountain, and there was a voice coming from the bottom of the mountain. His eyes beamed, and the light directly pierced through the void sky. He looked in the distance and saw several figures standing there at the foot of the mountain. These people all looked quite young with extraordinary temperament. They seemed to be aware, and also looked toward the mountain. Dazzling light flashed in their pupils. From a distance, Yi Futian's eyes and their eyes met in the air, and they both saw each other. They showed surprise and exchanged looks with each other. One of them bowed slightly toward the ancient mountain and said, "We sincerely request to see Great Elder," and are willing to cultivate under the Great Elder's guidance. Since Great Elder has made an exception to take in disciples, could you please also give me an opportunity? Great Elder is where the belief of the Tianhe realm lies. Since you have made an exception, please also kindly give us an opportunity. The people nearby also bowed and requested. All of them came to request following the Great Elder. The Sky River Great Elder was famed in the Tianhe realm many years ago. At that time, this place used to be extremely prosperous, and he had countless disciples. Moreover, the cultivation method used by the Sky River Great Elder could help cultivators perceive the path of sky and earth, and were of great use in casting the soul of the way and challenging the Runhuang Plain. Therefore, there had been people coming to request guidance during these years, especially those who cultivated in the late stage of the Saint Plain and prepared to challenge the Runhuang Plain. For many years, the Sky River Great Elder had never accepted any disciples. However, today, there was someone on the mountain, and he was very young, so they naturally thought that the Sky River Great Elder had made an exception and taken a new disciple. No one responded. Top figures are so charming, Futian thought to himself. Even after so many years, there were still people who came to seek knowledge from him. I said, I won't accept you as disciples, don't come again. At this moment, a voice said from behind Futian. Futian turned around and saw Sky River Great Elder there. Sir, you have already made an exception. Why don't you preach to the world as you did in the past? Ask someone. It's impossible. The Sky River Great Elder responded carelessly. Since you have accepted a disciple, you are willing to give young people a chance. Tomorrow, we will also come here to plead for you to change your mind, someone said, unwilling to give up. I say it again, don't come. The Sky River Great Elder's voice was cold, and it seemed a bit impersonal. Why? Someone asked. I have found someone who will inherit my mantle. One person is enough. I will teach him all the knowledge I've obtained in my lifetime, and will no longer be involved in worldly affairs from now on. The Sky River Great Elder said slowly. It was as if he had seen through the vicissitudes of the world. It seems that he had taken the young man on the mountain as a disciple, in order to find a successor and inherit everything he had. Obviously, they were not selected, and the young man on the mountain was selected by the Sky River Great Elder. Futian stood there quietly. The Sky River Great Elder must say like this in order to protect him. In this way, no one would have any doubts. He was peerless, but of course, the Sky River Great Elder's inheritor had to be peerless. The cultivators wanted to say something, but the Sky River Great Elder spoke up. I have decided, this is the last time to remind you. Feel free to come if you want, but it is just a waste of time. The people at the foot of the mountain were speechless. They were silent for a moment and bowed, saying, It's time to say goodbye to you, sir. Having said that, they all left. Futian sighed in his heart. Seeing the bleak scene here, he could not imagine how grand it was in the past. He looked toward the Sky River Great Elder. The Great Elder said, You have heard it. If you have the opportunity, go to Tianhe City for a walk. When you are outside, you will be my only successor. I have taught the deed of thorough comprehension to you. Understood, Futian replied. He understood the Sky River Great Elder's intention. On the one hand, the Great Elder wanted to clarify Futian's position. On the other hand, he did not want to be disturbed by others anymore, and wanted to focus on cultivation. It's just, with the status of his heart being of such a high level, would the Great Elder forever be so despondent? After entering the Runhuang Plain, shouldn't his state of heart be the strongest? The Sky River Great Elder stepped away from here, like an ordinary old man. He had seen through the world, and it seemed that he only wanted to find someone to inherit his mantle, so that he could completely hide in the mountain. Tianhe City was a megalopolis. In the past, there were countless gallant figures in Tianhe City, and all of them were proud of studying under the Sky River Great Elder's guidance. However, the catastrophic war turned Tianhe City into ruins, and it was only after so many years that it had recovered some vitality. Recently, shocking news came from Tianhe City. After so many years, the Sky River Great Elder finally accepted another disciple, who was also his last disciple. The Sky River Great Elder personally announced that this disciple would inherit his mantle. The Tianhe realm was not a supreme realm, and the title of Sky River Great Elder was conferred by people of the realm. The Sky River Great Elder was absolutely the strongest person beyond compare. For many years, countless people had entered his door to seek the path, but no one succeeded, until now, the Sky River Great Elder found an inheritor of his mantle. One could imagine how shocking this news was in Tianhe City. Almost everyone was talking about this matter, and at the same time, they were also talking about the inheritors of the Sky River Great Elder. Who was he? How could the Sky River Great Elder allow him to inherit his mantle? When countless people talked about it, in Tianhe City, a white-haired young man traveled in Tianhe City. This handsome white-haired young man, of course, was Futian, who had left the mountain. The Great Elder asked him to go down the mountain, and he understood what he meant. So after a period of cultivation, he came to this giant city. On his way, many people noticed Futian. His handsome face, white clothes and white hair, plus his temperament, were quite noticeable in Tianhe City. Many people wondered if this person belonged to an important force. Futian came in front of a restaurant. He looked up and stepped into the restaurant. He came to the top of the open-air building, asked for a pot of alcohol, several plates of appetizers, and sat quietly in a corner drinking by himself. Although he didn't speak, many people still noticed him. Futian not only had an outstanding temperament, but he also gave people a mysterious feeling. "Are you alone, sir?" At this time, not far from Futian's side, a girl in a long green dress, sitting in front of a wine table, looked at Futian. Her smile was gentle and charming. Although her face was not stunning, she was definitely a beauty, and her charisma could endear her to many people. Futian glanced at her, nodded gently, and didn't say anything. "I am Mu Qingyu of the Mu residence. May I ask you to have a drink?" the girl said with a smile. Many people in the restaurant were a little surprised. She was Qingyu of the Mu residence. The Mu residence was a family of Renhuang level, and Mu Qingyu was the lady of the Mu residence with excellent talent. Now, she had entered the Saint Plain, and had a lot of quarters. Mu Qingyu noticed Futian when he was outside the restaurant. She could tell this person's cultivation must be very high, and his temperament seemed to be in harmony with the world. He was so young, and with an outstanding disposition. However, she did not know his name. "Thank you, but there is no need," Futian said softly and looked out of the window. It seemed that he had no interest in this lady of Mu residence at all. This made many people in the restaurant show surprise, and they were even more curious about Futian. Mu Qingyu was a bit shocked, and then she smiled again. "It's my fault to disturb you, sorry, sir." She didn't have much to say, and she didn't feel uncomfortable because of this. Since the man had no intention of knowing her, she would not make herself unwelcome in front of him, but she still had curiosity. Futian was still drinking quietly. He was alone and seemed a bit lonely. Mu Qingyu glanced at him from time to time. Many people in the restaurant were talking about the news that the Sky River Great Elder had accepted a new disciple. The Sky River Great Elder once had 3,000 disciples, and among them, there were so many talents. Now that he had found the inheritor of his mantle, how strong is he? I really want to see how he fights. He doesn't have to be strong. Things are different from the past. At that time, even the Supreme Realm sent people to study under his guidance. Although he belonged to Tianhe Realm, how prestigious was the Sky River Great Elder's identity. He even married the lady of the Divine Clan. But now, the peerless young cultivators will not choose to be his disciples, and only people in Tianhe Realm. Someone whispered but didn't continue. Many people nodded secretly. They all knew the reason. Although the strength of the Sky River Great Elder was still there, after all, it was not the same as before. He had grudges with the Divine Clan, and some top characters were afraid to offend the Divine Clan of the Upper Realms. People chatted casually, and Futian didn't cut in. It was as if it had nothing to do with him. After a long while, a group of people flashed in the distance, and their life forces were very unusual. Many people in the restaurant looked at that side. And not long after, outside the restaurant, a young man stood in the void sky and looked in the direction of the restaurant. His eyes were sharp, It's him. Mu Qingyu looked at this person and murmured, apparently able to recognize this most prestigious figure in the young generation of the Tianhe realm, who had always wanted to become the Sky River Great Elder's disciple. Soon, more figures flickered over and came to the restaurant. Some of them stood on the top of other buildings, and some stood in the void sky. Some people walked directly into the restaurant and sat down. The atmosphere instantly changed. Yi Futian naturally knew that they came for him. When he went down the mountain, he knew that some people were staring at him, presumably those who wanted to find out his identity. At this moment, people's gazes fell on him, but he did not take it seriously and kept drinking. Did they come for him? Mu Qingyu looked at Yi Futian and thought to herself. There was a slight wave in her heart. More and more people were approaching, and many were extraordinary cultivators. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. 1575 The Sweep. 1575 The Sweep. Yi Futian lowered his head as he drank. It was as if everything happening around him had nothing to do with him. Next to the tavern, a man walked in the void and came to him, and it was the one who sought apprenticeship under the mountain that day. The man's name was Ren Quangsheng. He was a descendant of the noble family of Ren from Tianhe City. Besides his famous name, he was extremely talented, and he was now at the top of the Nirvana plane, wanting to obtain the realm of Ren Huang. Ren Quangsheng, as his name suggested, was proud and impertinent. Still, he could afford to be flippant. The only thing he was never flippant about was that, for several years, he had often traveled to the cultivating place of the Sky River Great Elder and asked to be seen beneath the mountain, hoping to be accepted by the elder as a disciple. He was always sincere, and he never showed any disrespect. Many people thought that Sky River Great Elder would be moved by Ren Quangsheng's sincerity and accept him as a disciple. But before that day had come, they heard that Sky River Great Elder had found an heir to pass on all his crafts to, and that he was no longer looking for any disciples. Then, what was Ren Quangsheng doing here now? Looking at the others, they were genius talents of the younger generation in Tianhe City. Many were from well-known families without exception. No one from the older generations was there. The reason for their attraction was very obvious. The heir of the Great Elder, many thought instinctively. After all, the entire Tianhe City had been discussing this matter recently. Many descendants of the famous families have appeared, and it seems that many of them want to be disciples under the Sky River Great Elder. Who did they come for? Many wondered. They turned their eyes slowly turned and finally landed on a place where all the gazes converged. Over yonder, the man with white hair sat there, drinking quietly. It was as if he was outside of this world. This man is the heir to the Great Elder? Many people secretly exclaimed. The man's temperament was indeed extraordinary. With his white clothes and white hair, he seemed to be one with the heavens and the earth. However, no one had ever seen him before. In Tianhe City, there had never been such an outstanding figure of the Saint Plain. Where did the Great Elder find his successor? Ren Quangsheng of the noble family of Ren. Ren Quangsheng stood in the void. His eyes landed on Yi Futian. He continued, I saw you that day under the mountain. I take it that you must be the successor of the Great Elder. Indeed. Everyone's hearts trembled slightly. Some in the tavern were just talking about him not so long ago. They didn't expect that person to be sitting right there. Yi Futian put down the wine cup. He slowly raised his head to look at Ren Quangsheng, saying, Is there something I can help you with? It's nothing really. It was just that I have wanted to cultivate under the Great Elder for a long time. After I saw you that day, and when I heard that the Great Elder had already found his successor, I wanted to meet you. Now that you are here, I've come to take a look, Ren Quangsheng said. There is no difference except that my physique is better, Yi Futian whispered. He continued to drink by himself. Many people expressed a look of surprise. This guy was not the least bit humble. Next to him, Mu Qingyu smiled a little. She didn't expect that the disciple of the Great Elder would have a sense of humor, or that his physique was indeed very appealing. No, your temperament is also extraordinary. For many years, The Great Elder has not accepted any disciples. Since he chose you as his successor, we naturally would never doubt the decision of the Great Elder. Not because of Yi Futian, but because of Sky River Great Elder. Would the first person in Tianhe realm choose someone mediocre to inherit his crafts? No matter what other people had thought, at least he would not believe them. He had gone to visit many times before, but he was refused by the Great Elder. Didn't the Great Elder know his talent? Many people used to think that the Great Elder was not as picky about the disciples as before, and that he may not be able to select the ones that were too outstanding. However, upon hearing the words of Ren Guangxing, they were a little skeptical. After so many years, the decision to accept a disciple as a successor perhaps was not made lightly. This white-haired young man may be more than what meets the eye. It's just that. At this time, Ren Guangxing continued, the Great Elder is the first person of cultivation in Tianhe realm. Even though his decision is not to be questioned, I still want to see the heir he picked. I want to know, after for many years of not accepting any disciple, who is worthy of the Great Elder. Many people nodded when they heard this. Ren Guangxing was still Ren Guangxing after all. So, Yi Futian asked. So a lot of people came, Ren Guangxing said. Indeed, many had come. There were cultivators all around the tavern. They were here for Yi Futian, whose name had spread throughout Tianhe City as the heir of the Great Elder. Yi Futian's right hand rested on the table, still holding the wine cup. He looked up at everyone and said, So are you going to come up one by one, or all together? Li Ku asked the successor of the Great Elder for advice. At this time, in another direction, a young man with a thin build spoke, and an extremely dangerous will of the way flowed from him. As do I. In another direction, someone also stepped forward. Suddenly, the vast world was shrouded in sword will, and the chiming sound of sword whistled between heaven and earth. In that direction, a young man, who carried 2 swords on his back, moved forward. There were a few strands of white hair at his temples, making him appear extremely captivating. The sword will increased a few degrees with every step he took. Many people in the tavern started to get up and move away from this place of strife. The entire tavern was shrouded by the will of the way, and this small tavern couldn't afford to get in the middle of those who had come here. Every one of them was an extraordinary figure in Tianhe realm, so if they got involved somehow, no one would care about their welfare. Above the sky, some people of the Saint Plain stepped down. Many looked up, and some recognized the person and let out a surprised shout. It was the madman of the Wild Clan. Normally, it was unusual to see all these extraordinary people gathered in one place, and today, they came for just one man. I also want to experience the strength of the successor of the Great Elder, said a rough voice from the void. The world was rocked by it. The tavern made a rumbling sound, as if experiencing an earthquake. It seemed that it might collapse at any moment. Mississippi. Several people around Mu Qingyu released the might of Saint Plain to protect her, cautioning her. Mu Qingyu nodded, then got up and backed away. Her beautiful eyes glanced at Yi Futian, who was in the center of the storm. The wine table in front of him was trembling, but the hand that was holding the wine cup was as steady as ever. He sat there quietly as if nothing had happened. His calmness surprised many onlookers. Although he was the successor chosen by the Great Elder, everyone who had arrived was an extraordinary character. Each one of them was a genius character who could be ranked in Tianhe City, as they all had a great chance to enter Renhuang Plain. Under such circumstances, Yi Futian's face-off with all of them would not be an easy task. Clink! A clear sound came out, and the wine glass in Yi Futian's hand shattered under an invisible sword will, directly turning into dust. Yi Futian's hand was suspended there, and then he slowly lowered it. Another sound came out. This time, the table in front of him was shattered and collapsed at his feet. Boom! Finally, the chair that Yi Futian sat on was also shattered into nothingness, unable to withstand the pressure. Yi Futian stood up in the center of the storm. His white robe fluttered as all the will of the way fell down, covering his body. Looking at people in all directions, countless more in the distance stared at the lone figure on top of the tavern, where only Yi Futian was. At this time, the ancient characters around Yi Futian shone brilliantly, and different characters surrounded the sky. Suddenly, the power of the great path between heaven and earth rushed madly into his body. His body turned into the divine furnace of the great path, refining the way of heaven and earth. What a powerful breath! All felt the breath of the great path within Yi Futian's body. Everyone around him wore a grave countenance. They dared not to be careless. "If you don't make a move again, you will not have a second chance," said a voice from the tavern, which surprised everyone. Even when facing such powerful cultivators, Yi Futian still had such arrogant words for them. Bang! Diagonally, in the sky above, a figure stepped forward and rocked the void. A vast pressure of might pressed against Yi Futian's body, as a giant vortex storm appeared above. There were mountain peaks within the storm, and in an instant, this extremely violent might of the way frightened those who were in the distance. Rumbling sounds came out as the tavern began to collapse, and the ground was shaking. Buzz! The characters around Yi Futian's body were getting brighter and brighter, and they resonated with the great path. The character that signified heaven was now illuminated with radiant divine light. Boom! A dull sound was heard as the mountains of storm attacked downward, crushing a corner of the sky. Yi Futian raised his hand and pointed ahead, and the character of heaven flew out instantly, emitting a radiant divine light. It directly collided with that storm. Bang, bang, bang. The crowd saw that storm, and the mountains continuously exploded and were pulverized. The character that signified heaven directly penetrated both, while continuing its way forward, attacking the man in the void who had made a move. Boom! Boundless great force blasted in front of the other, causing that cultivator to fly out. The character of heaven bloomed in gloriously divine light, as other characters also flew high above the sky, revolving around the world, expanding their circumference with each rotation. The sky filled with a frightening storm of the great path, and Yi Futian was at its center. A holy illusion appeared upon Yi Futian's body, just like the divine body of the great path, gathering from the world. When the nearby cultivators saw this, they finally made their move. There was swordsmanship that cleaved through the sky, endless palm strikes, and also a great urn that slammed down from the sky. However, endless characters suddenly appeared around Yi Futian. This endless character transformed into a light screen. When all attacks descended, they were all being blocked outside. Deed of thorough comprehension. Those who were watching the battle from afar trembled in their hearts. On the successor of the Great Elder, the methods cultivated by the Great Elder, and the deed of thorough comprehension burst forth in radiant glory. Yi Futian's body slowly levitated from above the tavern. With his body moving upward, the storm of the great path would cover an even stronger area, until the glory of the characters was even more radiant. At this time, Yi Futian raised his arm, and when he had gathered the power of the infinite great path, he threw a punch directly in front of him. When this punch blasted out, those characters seemed to be transformed into the will of the fists, sweeping in all directions. In a short while, on the other side of the tavern, above the void, and on the streets in the distance, loud booming noises were heard. Those who had come to slaughter him seemed to have been penetrated by something, and their bodies were knocked away as they spat out blood. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Ren Guangxing's body was constantly being blasted backward, and the vast world was covered by the might of the way. The suffocating pressure enveloped him, as the giant characters pushed back everything. He groaned and started bleeding from the corners of his mouth. His breath vacillated violently. Ren Guangxing's body was constantly being blasted backward, and the vast world was covered by the might of the way. The suffocating pressure enveloped him as the giant characters pushed back everything. He groaned and started bleeding from the corners of his mouth. His breath vacillated violently. His eyes were focused on the white-haired figure standing in the void, and he was extremely shocked. It was not just him. At this time, in the vast area around the tavern, countless people were focused on Yi Futian. The divine light released by the deed of thorough comprehension was still dazzling beyond compare. One man, one hit. Everything was swept away. Of all the many extraordinary characters of Tianhe City, none was his equal. Mu Qingyu stared at that white-haired figure, and her heart was racing. He was so strong. If they were in the same nirvana plane, why was he so much stronger? Indeed, there was always someone better out there. Sky River Great Elder had not accepted any disciples for many years, but now he had finally chosen a successor, whose first battle had shocked the world. His realm was definitely already at the top of nirvana. His combat power was unlikely to find its equal from anyone below Renhuang Plain in all of Tianhe realm. Incredible strength. It seemed that the Great Elder's successor was not selected at random. The people in the distance shuddered. No wonder that the Great Elder wanted to live in seclusion. Perhaps it was because his heir was so outstanding that he wanted to pass on all his crafts to him, so he could completely dissociate himself from the outside world. In fact, in recent years, Sky River Great Elder had not involved himself much with the outside world either. He had been concentrated on his cultivation in the mountains, and did not seem to have completely gotten over the events that happened years ago. "The body of the Great Path," said a voice from the void. A figure stepped down from the sky, but this time, it was an old man holding a sword in his hand. Sky Sword Elder. Everyone who saw the old man couldn't help but tremble inside. The Sky Sword Elder did not have any extraordinary talents like Ren Guangxing and the others did. He had cultivated for many years, and yet was still unable to step into the realm of Renhuang. Many felt that he was limited by his talent, and might not overcome that bottleneck. But the Sky Sword Elder was extremely persistent, and his state of mind was extraordinary. He was not willing to give up so easily, so he devoted himself to cultivation, exhausting all his efforts on the art of swords, continuously making progress, ever approaching the limit of Saint Path. He had stayed in nirvana for many years, and his sword was always improving. In the endless years, he crafted the Sky Sword. Rumor had it that the Sky Sword could put an end to any cultivators under Renhuang. Even though those genius talents in Tianhe realm might possess superior gifts compared to the Sky Sword Elder, as far as cultivation and combat power went, they definitely were not his equal. Long ago, there was some talented person who challenged Sky Sword Elder, but was wiped out by a single strike. Because it was an open duel of life and death, the opponent's family did not pursue the matter further. "Heir to the Sky River Great Elder, please enlighten me." Sky Sword Elder's eyes were poignant. From a glance, it looked like an extremely fierce sword light came down from the sky, stabbing Yi Futian's spiritual soul. A terrible storm of sword will manifested between heaven and earth, splitting the void. Countless sword light shone, and the Sky Sword Elder held the sword in his hand. It was as if his entire person had turned into a sword. Inside his body, the blood roiled in his veins as the will of Wei was flowing within. It was as if the body was no longer just simply flesh and blood, but was now the body of the Sky Sword. Sky Sword Elder did not cultivate a very powerful technique of attack, because he lacked the required powerful background. However, he relied on countless trials of life and death, and countless perilous situations to temper his sword into the Sky Sword, which was extremely fast and extremely sharp. There was a saying in Tianhe City, "When the Sky Sword is unleashed, demons and gods will weep alike. Anyone beneath Renhuang will be executed." Yi Futian looked up at the old man in the void. His white hair danced in the wind, and asked lightly, "There is a murderous intent on you. Have I offended you?" "It has nothing to do with anything. It's just that I cultivate in swords," the old man responded. "I have cultivated in the swords for many years, and the Sky Sword had already reached its realm. There are few rivals under Renhuang, so there was no one with whom to try my sword on. You are the successor of the Sky River Great Elder, and possess extraordinary fighting power, so I came because of it. When I unsheathed my sword, it would be hard to predicate life and death, so I advise you not to be merciful." Yi Futian understood that the old man had been trapped in this realm for too many years, and wanted to seek the way. Now that they had met today, he wanted to try his sword in seeking the way. This could be the strongest sword strike from the old man. "The elder chose the wrong person," Yi Futian replied. In reality, he came here for the same purpose as the old man, which was to seek the way. However, He was no longer the Yi Futian who was undergoing the trial at the Divine Palace. Back when Li Daozi had chosen him to try the sword, the timing had been good. Now there was no such opportunity for the Sky Sword Elder. Right or wrong, my pursuit is the ultimate of the sword. One day, I will find the answer that I'm looking for, the old man said curtly. As his voice faded, an extremely sharp light pierced toward him like an invisible sword that chopped down from the sky. In the next moment, he saw a beam of light. It was sword light. The old man had already disappeared. It was as if he had merged into the sword light, or rather, he had turned the way into a sword. Pursue the ultimate of the Saint Plane, Yi Futian said in his heart. He wanted to break the limit as a method to comprehend the way. His reasoning was not false, but it was not always useful. In the vast world, countless people looked at the sword, and at the moment when the sword light bloomed, cracks began to appear on the ground. Even those in the distance could feel that their spirit souls were being torn apart. His white hair flew about in the wind, but Yi Futian was standing there without moving. The light of the deed of thorough comprehension bloomed, like the divine furnace of the great path, that would refine the way of heaven and earth into one. The spiritual will caught the sword light that came in for the kill, and as his palm raised, he pointed toward the sky. The dazzling sword light flooded the void. The sword was approaching, and the infinite sword light penetrated Yi Futian's body like halos. But Yi Futian stood there motionless. His finger fell on the sword, and the force of that one finger was enough to stop the sword in its track. Clink! A clear sound came out, and countless path light poured into the sword. In the next moment, the sword flew back and forth twice, and the old man's figure appeared there. With a loud sound, he vomited a big mouthful of blood. His face was pale, and his breath deteriorated quickly. He was greatly weakened. Everyone in the crowd was extremely shocked. How could he be so strong? The Sky Sword Elder was at the top limit of the Saint Plane, and he couldn't even stop the force exerted by one finger? Since when was his sword so feeble? They couldn't understand, and that included Ren Guangxing. But their hearts were filled with fear and shock. Such strength was so great that it made the others feel completely hopeless. Even between limits, there are degrees of separation. Seeing the old man looking down at him, Yi Futian spoke. When the old man heard those words, he seemed to be deep in thought. He let out a long sigh, feeling a little bit sad. Indeed, even though he had dedicated his life to continuously surpassing his own limits, he had obtained some prestige in Tianhe City and won over many Nirvana-level geniuses. However, if those people had reached the same level as him, then perhaps he wouldn't be able to compete with them. Just as Yi Futian had said, there were degrees of separation even between limits. It was as truthful as it was cold and indifferent, and this gap could not be bridged after the fact. There is no need for Elder to take this to heart. Presently, those who can best me under Runhuang realm are not of Tianhe City, Yi Futian continued. He was being subtle when he said that Tianhe City did not have anyone who could beat him. Judging from his current state, it was indeed not an easy task to find someone in the 3,000 realms of the Great Path who could best him in the same realm. But even so, the people around him were still shocked by his cocky claims. There was no one in Tianhe City? How impertinent to include all of the cultivators of Tianhe realm in this category. However, having witnessed this battle, they too could not think of anyone under Runhuang realm who could beat Yi Futian. Even at this moment, it was unknown just how much Yi Futian's strength had expanded. This successor of Lord Tianhe was terribly powerful. The Sky Sword Elder gave Yi Futian a long look. He held his hands together to bow. He said, "Thank you for your enlightenment." As he finished speaking, he walked away. Despite the words of consolation from Yi Futian, he still felt disappointed. All the cultivation that he possessed was not enough to counter the power of one finger. What kind of gap was that? Even if the opponent was the successor of the Great Elder, this should not be how it ended. Who else wants to try? Yi Futian surveyed the crowd, but no one spoke. Even Yi Futian had claimed to be under the Runhuang Plain, and no one could fight with him. Judging from this combat power, it was indeed difficult to find an opponent. His body drifted down and landed on top of the tavern. However, at this time, he saw rays of divine light descending from the sky, and a group of people appeared out of thin air, as if they had shuttled over from a distance. This group of people possessed extraordinary temperament. The person in front was clad in a luxurious robe. He looked to be about 40 in age. Of course, his actual age must be far greater than that. He stood there, seeming to be one with the great path. He was definitely in existence of Renhuang realm. Your Royal Highness. Ren Guangxing saw the comer and bowed slightly. Afterward, many of the people below turned to this Renhuang and said, "Greetings, Your Highness." Yi Futian looked up at the newcomer. His Royal Highness? Did Tianhe realm, like the Crimson Dragon realm, have its own ruling royal principality? Before, he had heard Lord Taixian saying that the Sky River Elder ought to be the strongest person in Tianhe realm. There was indeed a royal family in Tianhe realm. The realm palace of Tianhe realm was now in Tianhe City. Tianhe City was the main city of Tianhe realm. The person who had just arrived was from the realm palace of Tianhe realm. He was the cultivator of the royal family, and he was in the realm of Renhuang. The eyes of that Renhuang landed on Yi Futian. With a smile on his face, he looked extremely gentle and comforting without any harshness of authority. Junior brother. That Renhuang looked at Yi Futian and called out to him with a smile, which stunned Yi Futian. Junior brother? A look of doubt flashed through his eyes. Was the Renhuang cultivator of Tianhe realm also a disciple of the Sky River Elder? No need to question. Our master had been in retreat for many years and never expected to accept another disciple after so many years. That Renhuang smiled and explained. He stepped down and came to Yi Futian without showing any superiority. Yi Futian understood when he heard his words that this man was a disciple of the same clan as his master. He might even be his uncle master. However, the great elder had not mentioned it to him, but had only asked him to go down the mountain and walk around. He was rather speechless. Once upon a time, in the battle that destroyed the realms, how many of the 3,000 disciples did the great elder lose? If there were still some survivors, wouldn't they all be his brothers, technically speaking? Moreover, this man was a member of the royal family of Tianhe realm. In the battle that destroyed the realms, did the royal family survive that catastrophe unharmed? At this moment, there were many thoughts flashing through in Yi Futian's mind. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. 1577 Little Uncle Master. 1577 Little Uncle Master Yi Futian remained silent and continued to size up the other. That Renhuang walked in front of Yi Futian and smiled. Duan Qing of the Duan clan at the Realm Palace in Tianhe realm. My brother, you may address me as Senior Brother Duan. Duan clan at the Realm Palace in Tianhe realm. It seemed that it was really the ruling royal principality in Tianhe realm, and it held a supreme status in Tianhe realm. No wonder those descendants of Renhuang also bowed down to pay their respect and saluted him as their Royal Highness. Senior Brother Duan, Yi Futian said calmly, but without too much emotion. The other prince was so enthusiastic and was a respected brother of his master, so he wouldn't be so rude as to ignore him. Duan Qing nodded with a smile. Master has been in seclusion for many years, disinterested in outside affairs. How many excellent characters in Tianhe realm desired to be accepted as his disciple, but did not get so much as a glance from him. I didn't expect that after so many years, Master would accept my brother as his successor. It is truly a rare occasion. However, when I saw my brother in battle, the reason couldn't be more obvious. Senior brother is too generous. It is just that my realm is a bit deeper, Yi Futian said. At present, his realm was indeed very deep. It was at the top of the Saint Plain. You are too humble. The Sky Sword Elder was defeated by my brother with one finger strike. With such strength, how many people of the Saint Plain in Tianhe realm could compare? Duan Qing continued. He glanced at the tavern below and said, when I learned that the master had chosen a successor, I thought we ought to drink a few rounds together. But the tavern here has collapsed, so why not go to the Realm Palace? There were many in the Realm Palace who were also master's disciples, and it will give them a chance to meet you. Yi Futian thought for a moment, a few reservations his heart. The news that the great elder had found a successor seemed to be widely circulated. The other was the prince of the realm palace. He should have already heard, yet he did not visit at the time. It seemed that his relationship might not be as close as expected, or he would have visited as soon as he had heard. Another thing was that the great elder asked him to go down the mountain to tell the world that he would be inherited from the great elder. The great elder, it seemed, had taken Duanqing's appearance into account. If this was the case, then he may have to go with the flow. Sure. Yi Futian nodded after a moment of contemplation, ready to go with Duanqing. He was not worried about being in danger. Sky River Great Elder was the mentor of Tianhe realm. He was their #1 cultivator. If he had asked him to come off the mountain to visit, nothing bad would happen. Duanqing nodded with a smile. He looked at the people around him again. Ren Guangsheng, Girly from Mu clan, and other geniuses of Tianhe realm, since you are all present, why not come with us to the palace and have a few drinks? It would a good way to celebrate with my junior brother. Thank you, Your Highness. In the distance, Mu Qingyu smiled and curtsied. Others also nodded one after the other. Naturally, they would not decline the invitation from the realm palace. The battle before had made them admire Yi Futian's strength, as it was not something with which they could compete. The realm palace of Tianhe realm was magnificent and awesome, full of solemn ancient halls served by throes of guards and cultivators alike, many of which were of Saint Plain existence themselves. This palace was like a city within a city, extremely vast. Duanqing, as the prince and a Runhuang existence himself, he possessed a complex of palaces of his own, known as the Prince's Palace. At this time, there was a grand banquet being held in the banquet square, and beautiful maids kept coming forth to serve precious wine and delicious food. Duanqing sat in the main position as the host, while Yi Futian sat directly opposite him as the honored guest. With such treatment, Duanqing showered him with enough prestige to raise his status tremendously. Today, I am fortunate to have met my brother, and my master was also fortunate to have such a successor. I will drink to my junior brother. Duanqing raised the glass. A maid knelt behind Yi Futian to serve drinks, especially for him. Yi Futian raised the glass, and then drank up. As the wine poured down his throat, it was extremely fierce, like burning flames that actually refined his meridians, veins, and blood. What strong wine! Yi Futian said secretly to himself. There was whey hidden in the wine, which was the kind of fine wine that could only be served by extraordinary principalities. I heard my brother introduce himself as being from the Yi clan. Yet there is no Yi clan in Tianhe realm. My brother is so talented that it only served to reason that you were born into a powerful family. Unless my brother is not from Tianhe realm? Duanqing asked. As a prince of the realm palace, Duanqing was well aware of all the great principalities of Tianhe realm, and there were no royal family principalities with the surname Yi. Well, Yi Futian nodded slightly. I came from another realm. Is that so? Duanqing revealed a rather interesting look. He continued, I'm just curious that since the master has been cultivating on the mountains and rarely went out in recent years, how was it that the master chose you as his disciple, and the successor who would inherit all his crafts no less? Is he prying? Yi Futian thought. Instead, he smiled and replied, it was quite a bit of a coincidence, and I still don't know the reason why I was chosen by the master until today. Brother might want to find some time to go on the mountain and let master tell you himself. Naturally, he would not reveal the matter. If Duanqing asked no more questions for him and went to the mountains to visit the great elder, it wouldn't be too late to apologize to him. It's true that I haven't visited the master for quite a while. I will find some time to visit. Duanqing nodded slightly, and his eyes revealed nothing unusual. How long has my junior brother been cultivating the deed of thorough comprehension? And your achievement was quite astounding, Duanqing asked mindlessly. He seemed quite casual. Several months, Yi Futian replied. Several months. Duanqing looked at Yi Futian and said, Brother, stop joking with me. The deed of thorough comprehension is broad and profound, and it took me many years of cultivation to complete it. The power that was displayed previously could not have been achieved in a few months. Talent. Yi Futian smiled nonchalantly. He did lie this time. He had been cultivating the deed of thorough comprehension for many years. However, the time he had spent cultivating the deed of thorough comprehension, when he came to Tianhe realm, was a short, so it was a half-truth. Whether the other believed it or not, it didn't really matter. If my brother says it was due to talent, I will believe it, Duanqing replied with a smile. Unfortunately, it would be so much more interesting if junior brother entered the clan back in the day. You could have witnessed the grandeur of the disciples of the 3,000 great paths. Within the same clan, how many excellent characters were among us? Of course, with the talent of my brother, even in those days, you would no doubt be the most outstanding. Father. At this time, two figures appeared at the same time, and everyone's eyes focused on them. It was a man and a woman, both of whom were extraordinary in temperament. The man was handsome, and there was a spirit between his brows that was similar to that of Duanqing. The woman was extremely beautiful. She was dressed in courtly clothes, which brought out her noble elegance to the fullest. These two were the progenies of Duanqing. Duanqing nodded and introduced them to Yi Futian. Brother, this is Duan Huan and Duan Yu. Huan Yu, the universe, Yi Futian thought. Duanqing pointed to Yi Futian, who was next to him, and introduced. This is your uncle Master Yi. They both shifted their focus to Yi Futian. As descendants of the royal family, both of them had an air of arrogance, and Duan Huan faintly exuded a sense of majestic authority. He might not have been older than Yi Futian, and his cultivation was not any lesser than Yi Futian's. Now he was also at the top of nirvana. Duan Yu was a little less. She was unblemished Saint Plain. They had also heard that Sky River Great Elder had accepted an heir, and it must be this was the uncle master in front of them. It's just that this uncle was so young, and seemed to be the same age as them, so it was not so easy to address him. Little uncle master. Although Duan Huan found it hard to say, he didn't disobey Duanqing's will and addressed Yi Futian as such, but his attitude was not so respectful. After all, they were from the same generation. Duan Yu had a strange expression on her face as she stared at Yi Futian. Yi Futian also returned her gaze. Duan Yu's eyes seemed to point to something, but Yi Futian had no intention to cut her a break. He was unmoved by her look, which forced Duan Yu to address him, Little Uncle Master. But her tone was rather chilly. Her eyes drifted to the others, and she saw some acquaintances who she did not expect to have been invited to the palace. You are both too polite. Yi Futian had seen their attitude, but did not take it to heart. How much respect could he have expected from the two descendants of the royal family, who were his peers? Yi Futian's calm expression indicated that he could not afford to go easy on them. The Grandmaster hadn't accepted disciples for many years. Once, I also requested a visit, but was not able to go. Now Grandmaster has accepted Little Uncle Master as his successor, so it must be that the Little Uncle Master has an extraordinary talent. Duan Huan's words attracted the attention of many people who were present. The Great Elder has excellent perception, and his chosen successor must be highly gifted with unparalleled talent. At this time, a voice was heard, as many people started walking together from outside. They came directly to the banquet, their eyes on Yi Futian. Brother Yi, I told you before that in addition to the many disciples who had been accepted by the master, there were also countless people in the palace of the mountain, including the royal family. What you see in front of you are seekers of instruction from the master, Duanqing said with a smile. Yi Futian nodded. Yi Futian greets all the elders. Although he was polite, he sat there without bothering to get up. They smiled and looked at Duan Huan, who had just spoken, asking, So, do you want to test the perception of the Grandmaster? Precisely. Duan Huan nodded with a smile. I just don't know if Little Uncle Master would be willing to enlighten me. He was not completely aiming at Yi Futian. The Great Elder had said himself that this was the person to pass on his crafts to. So Duan Huan also wanted to give it a try. This Uncle Master had better not be a fraud. You are not your Uncle Master's equal, Duanqing said lightly. How would Father know without me trying first? Next to him, Duan Yu piped up. Duan Huan's body emitted a magnificent momentum, and he said, "Just asking little Uncle Master to teach me." "Don't be rude," Duan Qing reprimanded. "It's quite all right, since I'm his Uncle Master. Instruction and cultivation was a matter of course," Yi Futian replied. He was unclear as to the real purpose of Duan Qing's invitation for him to come here. It's good to teach them a lesson, so that they know there is always someone better out there. Seeing Yi Futian speak, Duan Qing did not try to intervene again, but only made a comment very quietly. The moment his words fell, a breath of terror erupted in an instant and swept toward Duan Huan. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. 1578 Betrayal. 1578 Betrayal. Duan Huan frowned and glanced at Yi Futian. This little Uncle Master didn't even stand up to make his move? He took a step forward, and the pressure of the great path exploded. In a moment, a heavy atmosphere enveloped heaven and earth. At the same time, the majestic might of the way from Yi Futian pressed toward him with incredible surging power. Bang! A dull, muffled sound came out, and an invisible storm of the great path was blowing around Duan Huan. He stopped abruptly, and he even backed up a few steps in succession. Pust! As footsteps rubbed against the ground, sharp and harsh sounds came out. Duan Huan shook his head as he seemed to be in a trance, during which time, his spirit soul was also suppressed and attacked. The expression on his face changed abruptly, and a shocking pressure of might broke out. The divine light of the great path flowed around his body, circulating around and protecting him and his spiritual soul within the divine light. The expressions of everyone else also changed. What an arrogant breath! However, those who had seen Yi Futian in battle before were not surprised. The strength of the Sky Sword Elder was already at the top of Nirvana, and there weren't many opponents under Ren Hunag. Even Duan Huan, who was a descendant of the royal family, would be hard-pressed to best the Sky Sword Elder. Previously, the Sky Sword Elder had lost to the power of a single finger strike. Duan Huan would not fare much better, and he could not possibly be Yi Futian's opponent. Regarding this, Duan Qing understood this very clearly in his heart. The majestic might of the way still roared, rolling out surprise attacks that suppressed Duan Huan. Yi Futian stood up and walked out of the banquet area. Under his absolute control, the power did not even leak outside to affect the banquet. Above the body, there were methods of the deed of thorough comprehension blooming. His body was like a great divine furnace of the great path, and his breath was strong and majestic. Just like a real divine body, it was incomparably radiant. He walked a few steps forward. His pace was very light, but with each step, an even stronger pressure swept out. Seeing the protective divine light about Duan Huan, he took a step as his fist landed on the protective light. Crystal clear sounds came out, and the protective divine light shattered and collapsed instantly. Traces of fist will rushed into Duan Huan's body after cleaving through the protective divine light. It greatly shook all his internal organs and seemed to crush them. Despite the abundant breath inside the body, the pain was still palpable. Boom! Finally, the domineering Duan Huan could no longer bear this extremely powerful might of the way. As his body continued sliding back, he spat out a mouthful of blood, and his breath quickly weakened. Bang! After he slid back hundreds of meters, Duan Huan was able to stabilize himself. His face was pale, and he looked up at Yi Futian with some shock. This force was simply unstoppable. Little Uncle Master is indeed powerful, Duan Huan said while wiping the blood from the corner of his mouth. Many people in the banquet narrowed their eyes slightly and looked at Yi Futian. This successor of the great elder was incredibly strong. They were quite clear about Duan Huan's strength, which was absolutely top-notch, yet he could not block a single punch. There are not many under Ren Huang who can withstand my punch, so you need not take it to heart, Yi Futian said calmly. Although he was telling the truth, he was young, after all, and his tone was an elder lecturing someone younger. It was slightly outlandish for those who were not used to it. He was not the least bit humble, On the side, Duanyu was also speechless. Her elder brother couldn't even block a single punch. Was it true that the successor of the Grandmaster was this powerful? Duanyu had heard many of the stories about the Grandmaster since she was a child. He was definitely a legend, a young genius who was peerless in his days. After he had gained fame in Tianhe realm, he traveled the world and married the daughter of the Lord of God clan in the Supreme Path realm, with no objection from the Lord himself. This demonstrated the renown of the Sky River Great Elder when he was young. However, he did not stay in the God clan. After traveling around the world, he returned to his homeland, Tianhe realm. He taught the world, and his students spread all over Tianhe realm. He was worshipped by the people of Tianhe realm, and his name became the symbol of Tianhe realm, reigning high above all royal powers. Even the people of the royal family in the realm palace also sought to cultivate under his guidance. Her father, the Prince of Realm Palace, was sent very early on to cultivate under the tutelage of the Great Elder. She had also heard some gossip related to the past, saying that her grandfather, the master of the Realm Palace and supreme existence of Tianhe realm, would bow and salute to the Sky River Great Elder without exception. She hadn't experienced those times, and had no idea how prestigious the Sky River Great Elder used to be. She just knew that he was so very strong. He was the first man in Tianhe realm. But living in the royal family of the Realm Palace, Duanyu was also a proud person. The suggestion that the royal master had to salute to the Sky River Great Elder made her feel very uncomfortable. And now, even the heir of the Sky River Great Elder was also this impressive. Her brother had been crushed. She had not seen the Sky River Great Elder in action before. But now she had seen Futian in action, and she was greatly discomforted by it. Moreover, her father treated him so politely. My son was accustomed to always look higher. Today, my brother had taught him a thing or two. It's something he ought to remember. Next to him, Duanqing smiled and continued, "Take a seat." Futian returned to his seat as suggested. On this trip to the palace, although Duanqing was still kind to him, he could feel some subtlety in the atmosphere, which could be detected from Duan Huan's attitude and Duan Yu's eyes. These royalties were not as respectful to the Sky River Great Elder as imagined. If Duanqing regarded the Great Elder as a teacher, then his children should also be extremely respectful to the Great Elder, because of his example. But this was not the feeling he got. It seemed that things were not as simple as they appeared. This time, Duanqing's invitation was probably a test. Duan Huan and Duan Yu also sat down, but did not continue to provoke Futian, sitting quietly aside. Futian had been interacting rather casually without much thought, and Duanqing must have felt it. However, he didn't really care. Until he understood the relationship between Duanqing, the Great Elder, and the Master, he couldn't be too invested. If he was wrong, he could always apologize later. "It's been a while since I've been out today. I should be getting back to cultivate." Mid-banquet, Futian raised his cup to Duanqing and bid his goodbye. Duanqing nodded and toasted him in return. "I will be visiting Master in a while, and we can get together again then." "Very well." Futian nodded. He drained the wine from the cup, then stood up and put his hands together to bid his goodbye. Everyone at the banquet also stood up to send him off. "Goodbye, everyone." Futian bowed to the crowd slightly. "You two go ahead and send your uncle Master off." Duanqing said to Duan Huan and Duan Yu, "Please don't bother." As Futian was replying, he turned to leave. Many people in Tianhe City also began to leave. Mu Qingyu wanted to go up, but when she saw those fluttering white hair, she hesitated. She didn't do it. She was in a position that could be exposed to many extraordinary talents, but there were still some who were difficult to approach. Undoubtedly, Futian belonged to the latter. After Futian left, Duanqing looked to Duan Huan and asked, "What do you think?" At the top of St. Plain, and the body of the Great Path has been formed. He is stronger than anyone I have dealt with before in this realm, and he is an expert at attacking the spiritual soul, Duan Huan said. "In Tianhe realm, you are one of the top characters, but the gap was still so great. If you go to the Supreme Realm in the future, how are you going to compete with those top figures? Probably just looking. So get back and continue to cultivate, Duanqing concluded. At this time, most of the people at the banquet had left. Except for the three of them, there were only two others who remained. Father, after so many years, shouldn't we know some of the things that happened in the past? Duan Huan said. It's okay to let Duan Huan stay, a person next to him said. Duanqing thought for a moment and nodded, saying, the things of the past are very simple. For the future of the family, we made some necessary sacrifices. What sacrifice? Duan Huan asked. Ethics, conscience. Duanqing looked into Duan Huan's eyes, and Duan Huan was silent. The fact was, he had already guessed some things as the years had gone by. Even if no one had ever mentioned them, he could figure out a thing or two from the interactions of all parties. When the battle erupted to destroy the realm in the past, the Duan clan was outside of the royal family and had a deep relationship with the Sky River Great Elder. However, not only was it not destroyed in the crisis, but it became even stronger, which in itself was an extremely abnormal occurrence. Cultivation in itself is a cruel process. It's the same, even for the royal family. If we had chosen ethics, the whole realm palace, the descendants of the royal family, and countless others would have been buried in the disaster. Sometimes difficult choices have to be made, Duanqing continued. I can understand, Duan Huan nodded. Duanqing didn't say much. He looked at the two next to him and said, what do you think? This man's talent is so powerful, yet he is not from Tianhe realm. His origin is mysterious, but the Great Elder had chosen him as his heir, so there must be some unknown matters, one responded. A few months ago, there was a mysterious man who visited the master. Afterward, news came out that the master had chosen an heir, Duanqing said. Who? Someone asked. I don't know. Master was there, and I dare not snoop too much, otherwise I would be found out, Duanqing continued. This has to be reported up. Reported up? Duan Huan whispered as he looked at his father. Duanqing pointed up, and Duan Huan immediately understood. However, it was as it should be, since the realm palace had forsaken ethics and conscience. Thus, their position was naturally that of the other, and no wonder the Grand Master and realm palace coexisted in peace now. Because there was still someone above. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.